Hello and welcome to Nikolai's genetics lessons, and this problem going to be about how to solve genetics problems using rule of probability. And here's a problem. Family number 1 has a child with an autosomal recessive disease and one without. Family number 2 has a child with an autosomal recessive disease and two unaffected children. If the unaffected child from family number 1 and the unaffected child from family number 2 have a child, what is the probability of that child being heterozygous? So, as usual, I recommend you to pause video here, try to solve this problem on your own first, and when you would be ready, you can run video again and you can compare your answer with my answer and explanation. And our first step would be to draw a pedigree. So here is a family number 1, and in each family we have a mother and a father. So this is family number 1, and according to our problem this family has two children. Let's one child to be a male, another female. Sex of the children is not important in order to solve this problem because this is autosomal recessive genetic disorder, so both sexes would be affected equally, and there are equal chances for any sex to be affected, unaffected, or to be a carrier or heterozygous. Let's say that this female would be affected. So what we know about the second family? Once again, this family has a mother, a father, and three children. Let's say all three children would be females, all would be girls, and we know that two children are unaffected and one is affected. So let this girl here, this female, to be affected. And now the question, if this male and this female would have a child, unborn child we designate with this sign, what is the probability for this child to be a carrier or to be a heterozygous? So this is our question. So if we would say that this genetic disorder is due to mutation of the gene A, that means what is the probability of this child to be capital A and small a, to be heterozygous. And when we look at the pedigree of the family number 1, we can say that genotype of this female is small a, small a. This female is homozygous recessive and she affected. This gives us information instantly that her parents have to be carriers, have to be heterozygous. So she would be able then to inherit one recessive allele from her mother, another recessive allele from her father. In our problem, it's not said that any of her parents are affected with this genetic disorder, so we have to think that her parents are heterozygous, phenotypically normal, but would be carriers. So the genotype would be capital A, small a. Now we know that phenotype of this male is normal, but genotype can be with a homozygous dominant or it can be heterozygous. So what is the probability? Let's find out. We know that both parents are heterozygous, so mother and father are heterozygous. So when we build a Punnett square, we can find probabilities for an affected male to be whether homozygous dominant or heterozygous. And according to our Punnett square, we can say that this male belongs to this group. We can exclude this genotype and phenotype because we know that this male's phenotype is normal, so this male belongs to this group. So probability for him to be homozygous dominant is 1 out of 3. So let's put down this genotype, and this is probability 1 out of 3, and probability of the genotype that is heterozygous would be 2 out of 3. So 2 out of 3 is probability that this male belong to this genotype, so is heterozygous or carrier. So now let's analyze what we can find here, because we know that this female is affected, her genotype is small a, small a. Once again, this gives us information that both of her parents, those phenotypically normal, have to be carriers, and this is the only way how this female can get two recessive alleles. And this female here also can belong to the genotype capital A, or she can belong to the genotype that is capital A, small a. And because her parents are both heterozygous, just like in this example, her chances to be homozygous dominant would be the same as here, so 1 out of 3, and her chances to be heterozygous would be the same like here in this example, or would be 2 out of 3. So next move would be to find all the variants here. So for example, one parent can be homozygous dominant, another heterozygous, or parent number 1 can be heterozygous and parent number 2 can be homozygous dominant, or both parents can be heterozygous. These combinations would produce progeny that can be heterozygous, and we have to exclude variant that is homozygous dominant one parent and homozygous dominant second parent, because such a cross never would produce in progeny genotype that is capital A, small a. So this is clear, I think. So now we can move to the next step and find all the probabilities. Let's say that a parent from the family number 1, this parent, his genotype would be capital A, and we already find that such probability would be 1 out of 3, so 1 out of 3. And if parent from the family number 2 would belong to the genotype that is capital A and small a, and such probability is 2 out of 3, so 2 out of 3. And now let's build another Punnett square and find what is the probability for such parents to have heterozygous child. So let's say father on the top, mother here on the side, and if we build a Punnett square, we would see probability. So capital A, capital A, capital A, capital A here, capital A, small a here, capital A, small a here. So for such a family to have a child who is going to be heterozygous would be 1 out of 2, or 2 out of 4, which is the same, or 50%. So we have to multiply all these independent probabilities, and this is going to be probability for the child to be heterozygous, and the answer would be 2 out of 18, or 1/9. Let's say that second variant would be homozygous dominant female, and chances is 1 out of 3, and heterozygous male, and chances are 2 out of 3. And when we cross homozygous dominant parent and heterozygous parent, we already did it in this Punnett square. Probability that the child would be heterozygous is 1 out of 2. So the same numbers are here. And the last variant would be when one parent would be heterozygous. So, for example, female would be heterozygous, and chances are 2 out of 3. And male also would be heterozygous, and chances also 2 out of 3. And what is the probability that they would have heterozygous child? And here's another Punnett square, 2 heterozygous parents. And when we build a Punnett square, we can see what chances that they would have heterozygous progeny. And as you see, chances are 2 out of 4. So once again, we have to multiply by 1/2 that the progeny would be carrier or would be heterozygous. So 2 multiplied by 2, 4, by 1, 4. So 4 on top, and 3 multiplied by 3, 9, multiplied by 2, 18. So 4 over 18. We can simplify, and we can get 2 over 9. And as you remember, we excluded combination when one parent is homozygous dominant and another parent is also homozygous dominant, because such a cross never would produce heterozygous genotype. So here is the frequencies of 3 combinations that may produce heterozygous genotypes in their progeny. And the last step would be to use sum rule to add all these probabilities. So let's do it. So we have to add 1/9 plus 1/9 plus 2/9. So the answer would be 4 over 9, and this is going to be our answer. In other words, probability for these two parents to have a child whose genotype going to be heterozygous would be 4 out of 9, and this is going to be our answer. And one last note, I got this problem from one of my subscribers today, and he was wondering why for heterozygous genotype of the parents probability is 2/3, and for child to be heterozygous in all three calculations we use 1/2, because parental phenotype is known. We know 100% sure that the genotype is not homozygous recessive, so we exclude this genotype. This is why probability of the parents to be heterozygous is 2 out of 3, and probability for child to be heterozygous, as you see in all our calculations, if parents are heterozygous, would be 2 out of 4, because we cannot exclude this genotype. And if one parent would be homozygous dominant, another is heterozygous, also probability for the child to be heterozygous would be 1 out of 2. So this is all for today. Thank you for your attention. Please subscribe for my new videos that I post almost every day. Thumbs up if you like this video. Please write your comments, questions if you have any, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.